I'm Dana Brzee-Keith. I work for the Office of the Vice President for Research, and those of you on the postdoc listserv, you're very familiar with my name, I'm sure. You get deluged with messages. I hope they're helpful. Curious, I just want to do a raise of hands of how many of you are postdocs and how many are grad students. Postdocs? Grad students? Staff or some other entity? Great. Welcome here. How many of you are attending your first presentation from our postdoc series? Okay, hope you find it useful. We're quite delighted to welcome Dr. Joanne Caymans. She is the Executive Director of AdGene, which is a very exciting nonprofit company that helps scientists around the world to collaborate. Dr. Caymans received her PhD in genetics from Harvard Medical School and then spent 15 years at Abbott, where she led discovery research projects on small molecular and antibody approaches to inflammatory diseases, ultimately serving as group leader in molecular biology. In 2007, she joined RXI Pharmaceuticals as Director of Discovery, and she concluded there as Senior Director of Research Collaborations. In 2011, Dr. Caymans became the Executive Director of AdGene, a nonprofit plasmid repository dedicated to helping scientists around the world share high-quality plasmids. I do not know what I just said. Hopefully some of you do, or she'll explain it to you if that's important to know. Dr. Caymans founded the current Boston chapter of the Association of Women in Science, AWIS. She was the director of the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association Boston Mentoring Program for 3 years, and she serves on a number of other boards. In 2013, she was elected as a fellow to the Massachusetts Academy of Science for service to science and the community. We're quite happy to welcome Dr. Joanne Caymans.
Thanks. Thanks very much. So for those of you that came in late, for God's sakes, this is a networking workshop. So if you are sitting by yourself, you need to sit your butt down next to someone else who you don't know. Get up. We're going to have to wait till every single person, that's you, sit next to each other. Can someone come sit down here next to this gentleman so he doesn't have to move his cane? Come down. How about you there in the blue? Come, sit here. I'll get you a partner. 1 second. Come on. So I don't know if the people that came earlier noticed what happened, but when I made most people do that as they were coming in, I came in and this room was silent, and within 30 seconds, this room was noisy, okay? Even one seat between you and the next person is enough to say, I don't want to talk to you. That's what it basically says is, I don't want to talk to you. You guys in the back, why don't you sit with that woman up there? You two, sit next to each other. There you go. You're sitting by yourself, sit next to someone, please. Directly next to someone. You can move over, yeah. So even one seat is saying to someone, I don't want to talk. I don't want to meet you. I'm not interested in you. And I'm just interested in whatever the speaker is going to say, maybe. And I want to sit in the back because maybe I want to sneak out, too. Okay? So I promise you I will keep you entertained. I don't care if you walk out. I talk to hundreds of postdocs. It doesn't bother me. So, and if you want to interrupt me and ask a question, that's fine, too. I'll just keep talking. But I may answer your question. So the fact of the matter is that networking is not that fun for everybody. Not all scientists are introverts and hate networking, by the way. That is a misconception. In fact, in most surveys, we are 50% introverted and 50% extroverted. But 50% introverted is actually a high for a population in this society, and it lends a sort of feel to our community, whereas everybody can actually come into a seminar, and every single person, even when this topic is networking, will be sitting next to no one, okay? So my first piece of advice for you is, if you want to meet people, do not sit on an empty seat. Sit next to someone. And if you want to meet important people, sit next to someone that looks important. Because they're going to introduce themselves to you. At some point, it will be polite to just say, hi, I'm Joanne. What do you do? Okay? So that was a very, very simple exercise. All it has to do with is where you put your butt. It's a pretty easy thing to remember. And if you sit close to the back like you want to escape, that's also a message to the speaker that you're not interested. And if you're interested in meeting the speaker, forget it, because they get that you're not interested. Okay? So if you want to meet the speaker, come sit in the front. Okay? And speakers are often important people worth meeting. So, okay. All right, so I'm not going to go through my bio because we already had that in my introduction, but I do want to talk a little bit about those arrows, like how did I transition? Every single one of the arrows in my career was absolutely dependent on me networking and knowing people, okay? And when I say not networking, I mean that because it's not just exchanging cards and you meet somebody and you don't talk to them again, it's relationships built over time. So this job that I got was because my advisor had a lot of ties to industry. He was a consultant for Genetics Institute. He basically arranged my interviews. This was a long, long time ago, and he basically just made it so that 3 different people at 3 different nascent biotechs interviewed me, and one of them hired me. And he basically said, you should hire my grad student, she's smart, so hire her. You know, that was a pretty serious networking connection, right? To have someone, and if you're interested in choosing an advisor that has connections to industry or to potential academic departments that will help you, I have a talk on Bite Size Bio called How to Choose a Lab, and you might want to take a look at that. I don't have time to do all that today. So then going from BASF to RXI, I'd been 15 years, it was at Abbott at the time, and you know, it's a long time to be in one job these days. For Abbott, it really wasn't so long. It was quite shocking, actually, when I left Abbott, because people stay there for 50 years. But I was kind of bored. I was topped out. I wasn't doing, there wasn't really opportunity for growth there. It wasn't so much moving up. It was just doing new things. And some things had happened, so I was doing less new things, so I wasn't that happy. And someone I had met 9 years before, so when RNAi, oh, I should ask a question. How many people are biologists here? Just so I know how much biology. Okay, not too much biology. Okay. So I was in a new field of RNA research called RNAi, and I got in at the ground floor when the first paper came out in '98. Subsequently, this is Nobel Prize winning work. And I got involved in that community a little bit, doing RNAi in immune cells, which was quite unusual. I became sort of an expert in that because not many people were doing it, speaking at conferences. And there was one guy who I kept seeing over and over at conferences. And first we started, you know, sitting next to each other, and then we would have beers, and then we would have dinner, and then we would say, hey, are you going to that conference? Let's get together. And then one day I had lunch with him after I had 14 years and 9 months at Abbott, and he said, hey, how's it going at Abbott? And I said, you know, I'm kind of interested in moving on. And he said, oh, we need a research director at this RNAi company. You would be perfect. And 2 weeks later, I started there. Okay, didn't have to interview I interviewed, but it was basically a done deal. I never looked for a job. So the first time I ever looked for a job was when that company didn't make it. Most biotechs don't make it, so that's pretty normal. I was there for 4 years. And, you know, a whole bunch I was laid off and put up on my LinkedIn status, I'm looking for work. And like a half a dozen of connections sent me the description for the executive director of Adgene. And they said, this is a perfect job. This job description is you. You have to apply for this job. So the woman who was the founder, one of the founders of Adgene, and who was the person I would be replacing as executive director, she wanted to move on and do some different things. She still works at Adgene, but she's the director of marketing. Was a person I had handed an award to in an award ceremony for women in science for an organization called West. And I had been the presenter and had to introduce her and physically hand her the award. So when the ad came out, I didn't have to find, send my resume in, find a connection. I called Melina and I said, hey, I hear you guys have a job opening. I'm kind of interested. And she said, oh, let's have coffee. Come on down. And 4 months later, not quite 4 months, 2.5 months later, I started at Adgene as executive director. And when I went in for my last interview for the board, so when you're an executive director, it's like being the CEO, the board is your boss, right? 6 people in the room. It's kind of unnerving, frankly. I've been through many rounds of interviews. I know that we're down to 2 candidates, me and one other candidate. And I'm standing in this room and I walk in and 3 of the people in the room were people that I knew before. So one of them was someone I had done RNAi work with from the Broad, who's David Root. And David, how are the girls doing? I heard that new project is going well. It wasn't like, hi, I'm Joanne, nice to meet you, Connie Sepko, who I had known for many, many years from when I was a Harvard graduate student, and I'm best friends with her sister-in-law, so that was pretty convenient. And then another person I had worked with at the Healthcare Business Women's Association and who had seen me speak and do work, actually. So all because I just talk to people. Now, I'm pretty extroverted, you can probably tell that, but you don't have to talk to people in uncomfortable situations. You just talk to people that you like and you enjoy, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so, and along the way I had a couple of kids. One of them's an MIT junior now as of last week. And that was when I did a lot of networking. So a lot of my networking was not professional. It was actually extracurricular. It was around science-oriented groups, but by volunteering and by doing work in those groups, that's the natural way to network, because you just work with people and get to know them instead of artificially meeting them. You're on a committee together, you run an event together, you know, whatever that feels like. A lot of my networking and connections are through that. Okay, so how many people in the room use plasmids? This is my public service announcement because Addgene pays for my time here. And how many is there anyone in the room who uses plasmids who's never heard of Addgene? Yes, okay, so we'll go fast. So Addgene is, any of your friends who are biologists, you should tell them about Addgene. We're like the ATCC, we're a repository, but we're a repository for plasmids, which are small circles of DNA that life scientists use to study all areas of early research. We have 25,000, oh, that's Blue Gene, he's our little mascot. Did anybody see Nature this week? We have an ad in there, it's kind of fun, it has a little tattoo in there, so we're pretty excited about it. It's our first major ad, so Blue Gene's on there. We actually have over 25,000 plasmids stored in the library now. We ship about 1,800, 1,700 a week. Half of them outside the US. We take care of all the tech transfer for you. So especially if you're a postdoc and you have published plasmids and you're moving on to another lab or to another job, if you want to make sure that your published plasmids are always available. I know I had a box of plasmids I carried around for about 5 years after I left Abbott. Actually, I had it from my graduate school. I was still carrying it around, and when I left Abbott, I threw it away, and a week later, somebody called me to ask me for a plasmid. And JK207 was no more, you know, it was thrown out. So we make sure that doesn't happen, and we archive all those reagents and distribute them internationally. These are some of the benefits. I won't go into it now since most people here have heard of Addgene, but tell your friends, you know, we're a nonprofit. We just won a Nonprofit Innovation Award this morning. We're pretty proud of it, so for Massachusetts. So, you know, we're not here to make money. We're here to help scientists collaborate. That's our mission. Okay, and lest you should think in whatever field you are that there's not a reason to deposit in I know scientists like data. So this red line is what happens if you deposit materials. These are the number of citations you get, and these are the number of citations you get if you don't deposit your materials in a repository. So if your impact factor is at all important to you, and it probably should be if you are looking especially for jobs in academia, you should share your reagents openly because it's better for your career. Okay, so now we're going to talk about networking. So what is networking? You know, networking has this bad rap of, you know, uncomfortable events late at night when you're exhausted and don't really want to go. And that's not really what it is. That's not what I consider networking. It's really building relationships with people. I know that you're busy. I did it. I was a Harvard graduate student and I had a child and got married during that time. I was pretty busy, okay? But it is absolutely crucial that at every stage of your career, you are making connections and meeting people, because you never know what's going to happen and when those relationships are going to pan out and how they can help you. It's not just contacts, but it's building relationships that are important. It can happen in your professional life. You know, I'm Orthodox Jewish. I know every Orthodox Jewish biologist in Boston, okay? And I could call any one of them and ask for a favor, because we have an informal network. You may be from some small country and you may know all the people from your country that are in Boston. You should have a network with them. You should have a community there and create one. Whatever it is, that's another way to create community. I know I have friends whose kids are in Russian school. They network very heavily with the Russian school parents. Very important, you know, to keep those connections. There's nothing wrong about doing that. It's as long as you're there to help other people, it's fine. So why is it important to you? Well, it does make your job more satisfying. I know that's very hard to believe when it feels like all you want to do is get your research done, but as your career goes on, you're not going to be doing that same graduate school grind thing for your whole career or postdoc grind thing for your whole career. You're going to want to be looking for opportunities and collaborations. All of the cool research has been at the forefront of collaborations, right? Especially in people in diverse fields. I don't just meet molecular biologists, I try to meet people, anybody who's doing anything. You know, now I'm in the operations of a company. I meet HR people, I meet financial people, and they're all interesting because we're all doing different things. And so the people least like me are actually the ones that are kind of the most fun to network with for me. It's a support system, so I have people that I meet with just to tell me when I screw up and listen to me sob and say, I did this really embarrassing thing, you know, and they're like, it's okay, it's all right, get a hold of yourself, you know. So your connections can also be cheerleaders, they can be mentors, they can be coaches, but the closer the relationships are, the better the person knows you, the more fun it is, right? So again, I'm not telling you to network with people you don't like, I'm telling you to find people that you enjoy. Those are the people you want to build relationships with. Okay. So even scientists need a network. I actually had someone raise their hand and ask me, but scientists don't really need to know other people. They just need to do their work. That's such a load of poppycock and so ridiculous that I don't know how you ever think you're going to succeed in your careers if you don't meet other scientists, okay? Your network may look different from mine, but you still have to have a network. So these colleagues, these people that you're in grad school with, in 10 years, they're going to be reviewing your grants. Okay, and believe me, if you think that's an anonymous, fair process, once again, quite misguided. That's not how it works, okay? So if the person that is reviewing your grant is someone you had beers with 10 years ago, he or she is going to think more fondly of you. There is nothing they can do about it. It is human nature, okay? So it is extremely important that you have beers with people and don't just do your research. This is your pool of potential collaborators. You know, so people that I met years ago are sometimes the people that I call and say, hey, I have an idea for something. Can we do this? It's been great at AdGene because I've got to tap into all my old academic networks and get people to deposit things or to do things for AdGene because people like to do things for AdGene. But, you know, it's been me kind of activating a whole sleeping portion of my network because I've been in industry for so long. So you never know. You should be networking with the students. If you're a postdoc now, you have grad students in your lab now, you have grad students in your last lab, you can be working on mentoring them and helping them. That's good for your career to be mentoring people. It gives you leadership, a chance to practice your leadership skills. Who is one of the most important people in your department to network with? The administrative assistant. No kidding, okay? That person can make your life so much easier, I can't even tell you, okay? So, you know, you can't think in your head like, you know, oh, I need this thing. You just have to be like, get to know people that are around in your environment. You can do a whole lot, you know, so who is going to get time for you to speak with your advisor? Your advisor's admin, right? She's the one who's going to tell you, hey, he's got an opening Friday at 3, and, you know, it just opened up. Do you want that? So if you're in tight with the administrative assistant, you are going to get better service in your career, in your graduate or postdoc career. So, you know, you really can't look to different levels to decide. Granting agencies, because they're going to be able to explain to you how the granting system is working, what the trends are. You know, so when I was thinking of applying for a grant for AdGene, and I called someone I knew and said, do you think I'll get this grant? And she said, well, I'm going to connect you with the woman who administers that grant. And then I spoke directly to that person, and that woman said, you would be wasting your time, don't bother applying. Saved me probably weeks of work. Right, by getting a straight answer from someone who really knew the answer to that question, okay? There's the Thesis Whisperer. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that website, but there's a lot of great blogs on the Thesis Whisperer about graduate and postdoc life. And there's a great article there called Crash Course on Socializing at a Scientific Conference. I don't have time to go into all the details of that, but the author of that blog gives some great ideas for how to actually work a conference for every graduate student, and I recommend you read it. It's excellent. Okay, so let's talk about jobs. So how many people here are thinking they might go into industry? Just aside from academia, might go into industry. So 65% of you probably will be in industry, by the way, whether you think you are or not. So even if you're considering it, there's no question that this is how people get jobs. Referrals, direct contact, this is hiring agencies, and this is the ad that you send your resume in cold. Okay, so these are hard data. These data are from 2001, but the numbers haven't changed very much. Okay, this is how you get industry jobs. So I have another talk called From Academia to Industry. If you want, I can send you the link. There's a webinar available that I gave at NIH. And the basic bottom line of that whole talk is you have to meet people in industry to get a job in industry. So the tools that I'm going to talk to you about here are ways to do that. Okay, so we're going to go through some very concrete steps and a little bit of practice here today. So the first thing you want to do is identify your network. You want to learn how to connect with people. We're going to do some little tricks for meeting and mingling for those of you that are uncomfortable. One of the most important steps to networking is listening and helping. So when I meet someone, I don't think what they can do for me, I think what I can do for them. Okay? And we'll talk a little more about that. Very important to ask for help. So if you don't tell people what you're looking for, they can't help you because you haven't given them anything to help you on. So learning how to ask for help, and then how to do some follow-up, which is sometimes the most uncomfortable part. Let's say you do sit your butt down next to somebody, you do introduce yourselves, and you kind of like each other, and maybe you want to have a beer. What do you do now? Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so identifying your network. Everybody has a core network. Your core network is your family and your friends. So my sister-in-law worked at Boston Consulting Group for many years, which was a huge, rich network for me to tap into when I was interested in getting management consultant help on the project. And I really needed it pro bono. So having a sister-in-law who was a partner at Boston Consulting Group was extremely convenient, okay? We're also very close, so that helps too. You know, don't neglect your family and your friends. The people like to do favors for each other and their family, so that's a good place to start. You know, you're always meeting people in the community. You're at the soccer game, whatever your hobby is. So I'm Jewish, so I have a whole temple community of network that I propagate. I don't do sports, but hopefully many of you are getting some physical exercise once in a while. You know, so maybe your running club or your wall climbing, whatever it is, those are great people to get to know. And you can also think about it strategically, and we're going to talk about scientists like sort of data, so we're going to talk a little bit about the data of networking that some organizations are working on. So let's take a little quiz. If you have a pen, you can write it down or you can just put it in your head. So here's the first one. Do you interact on a one-on-one basis with more than 25 colleagues a day? Yes or no? If you're keeping track, question number 1, yes or no. Give yourself a Y or an N. Okay? Second one is, will your work suffer if you are absent because no one else can do what you do? So do you know some technique that nobody else in the lab? So I used to be the only one that could make the needles to dissect a yeast tetrad. That was an extremely valuable. If I wasn't there, nobody could dissect yeast until I trained someone else. It gave me such a feeling of power. But really, do you enjoy spending time with your close-knit group of friends and colleagues? So do you not just work at the bench? Do you have some friends and colleagues that you spend time with as well? Yes or no? Do you have a range of interests and belong to very different organizations? A sports club, an art group? Do you volunteer? Something not your work? That's, again, a yes or a no. And finally, are most of your friends different from you in terms of their careers, tastes, and social activities and lifestyles? So do you only know scientists of your ilk, or physicists, or whatever it is that you do? Or do you interact with different types of people? Okay. And are most of your acquaintances unknown to each other? So do you have groups of people that would not be comfortable at a party together? That's how I always ask this question. Like, my husband and I, when we have a party, we have to figure out which pod of party we're going to have. You know, we can't, if we invite everybody, it's weird, you know, so that's one thing. Okay. So if you answered yes to questions 1 and 3, you might be what the networking gurus call a hub. And if you answered yes to 2 and 6, you might be a gatekeeper, and I'm going to explain what these are. And if you answered yes to 4 and 5, you might be a pulse taker, okay? Or you may be a combination of these things. So what are these things? So the hub is someone who's directly connected to many, interested more than interesting, and disseminates info in an organization. So you may know somebody like this. Who's the person in your lab who always knows what's going on? Or in your group or in your department? She knows who's getting married, she knows who's sleeping together, she knows all that stuff, right? Okay, so that person might actually be a hub, okay? Then there are pulse takers. They get the mood out quickly, they know how to get stuff done, they access the people who know the right people, okay? And finally the gatekeepers, and those are the people that hold the boundaries between different groups. So for example, when I was at Abbott, my group did the job of cloning things de novo. So this is before there was Genome Project. We had to use PCR and other techniques to find new genes. So if we needed to clone sheep IL-17, they called us, and we cloned the IL-17 gene from the sheep, okay? So what would happen is all the new requests for new clonings would come into my group. And I always knew who was starting projects on a new field or a new idea, because I would get requests from 2 different departments for the same gene, okay? So that sort of made me a gatekeeper. I could connect those people and say, hey, you in molecular biology and you in biochemistry, you guys are working on the same target. You should talk to each other and join forces, okay? So you don't come with the same idea to management. If both of you work on it, it could be a better project, right? So I had this role as a sort of, you know, matching people and getting them to do things. If you do that, if you connect people, then you are a gatekeeper, okay? I'm also somewhat of a hub now in my current career. I know a lot of people from industry, from academia, from biotech, from pharma, from women in science, from Hispanics in science, from all kinds of different groups. So I join a lot of groups together, okay? So people like that are good people to know. So there's no reason why you shouldn't get to know them, because they like to get to know people probably in a directed fashion. So if you see someone who seems like a good person to know, That's okay. You should pursue that relationship and maybe do something for them so that they remember you and keep you in their head. So networking is really building from an informal to formal. I talked about becoming active in groups. That's the most natural way to network. Volunteering, being on a committee, leading a committee, demonstrating your leadership skills, your organizational skills, your originality, your initiative, and your innovation. All those qualities are things that speak well for you when you need a reference. So when I took the job at Addgene, they wanted a recommendation from someone who worked in nonprofit, because I was moving into the nonprofit space from the for-profit biotech, and they wanted to feel comfortable that I was committed to nonprofit work. And I had enough people from being on nonprofit boards that there were references that I could call on, even though I'd never been paid to work with those people, but that felt comfortable that they'd worked closely enough with me that they could recommend me for those things. That's the easiest way to meet people. So I have a rule. So one good way when you're in an academic department is to get on the committee that invites speakers and guests. That's an awesome way to meet important people. Sometimes you get to take them out for lunch or dinner. You get to interact with them before and after to plan the event. They might remember you. You don't know. It could be helpful, right? It's also quite interesting. You meet interesting people and you put yourself out there. So that's one good kind of, to be involved in organizing a conference. Sometimes conferences will let postdocs and grad students have representation in the organization, like AAI or whatever, APS or whatever your organization is. Great way to meet important people and helpful people. But it does entail some work. You have to make some time, because the worst thing, of course, is to volunteer and do it poorly. Because then what will they remember? They will remember you as an irritating, poorly working person, and that's not what you want. So only do what you think you can do and do it well. So I have a rule I've had for 20 years. I have a lunch with another human being twice a week, every week. This was fairly challenging when I had 2 small children, and I wanted to just eat my sandwich at my desk and stare at the wall, perhaps sleep for 15 minutes, because that was the most tempting thing to do. But I put it on my calendar, I make arrangements far in advance, and I have coffee or lunch with another human being twice a week. It's much easier now that I'm in Cambridge. I worked in Worcester for 18 years. But so sometimes then it was breakfast instead of lunch. But you know, if you're trying to give yourself goals to be a better networker, you don't have to go to networking events if you're shy and those are painful for you, but just one-on-one discussion is usually much easier than talking to people in a crowd. We'll talk about events. They are important and they're good ways to meet people, but really the best way to get to know people is one-on-one. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk a little bit about online networking. I do a lot of online networking. You can find me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn very actively, partially because of my role in Addgene. I meet a lot of cool people on Twitter, by the way, which is, I've had speaking engagements, writing opportunities, business-to-business opportunities for Addgene. So I've actually really liked Twitter a lot, but you have to close the deal. So everybody who I've ever met on Twitter, I have eventually met in person that I've worked with. It's not real life, but it's a good way to open doors. And as I mentioned before, whenever I meet someone, I don't think what can they do for me, I think what I can do for them. And you know, you may feel like there's not much you can do yet, but you build up to that in your career. You have knowledge, and you read papers, and you see things, and you know people. Sometimes all I do for people is connect them to someone else. I say, oh, you're working on that? You know what? That person's working on that. I think you would enjoy meeting each other. I think you should talk. And sometimes that's very helpful for people, because they're not so good at making their own connections. One of the funny stories I have about this is while I was interviewing for Addgene, I was interested in a kind of up-and-coming biotech company, and I was trying to get interviews in there, okay? And I was working my network, and I'm using LinkedIn, and I'm trying to connect to somebody to get in there, because as you know, sending in my resume cold was probably not going to work, right? And finally, I got connected to a friend of a friend of a friend who said he would have coffee with me from this company. Fairly senior, like a director of a department, psych, right? I meet him for coffee. He comes in 5 minutes late. He looks like hell. Hair's uncombed, shirt's untucked. He looks like he's half there. And he's clearly not happy to be wasting an hour on me, okay? Very uncomfortable. Talk for a few minutes. I'm not right for the job they have open. It's not a match. Now what do? We're supposed to have coffee for an hour, and he's you know, finally I just looked at him and I said, you look like hell. He's like, oh, I feel like hell. I go, what the hell's going on? He goes, oh, I have 2 kids, they won't sleep, we don't have any fun anymore, like my wife's on my back, I'm so tired of work, all I do is work, the kids won't sleep, I got no sleep, I can't. He says, and you know, we just want to go to the museum this weekend. We love museums, and since we had kids, we can't go to the museum, because they're just a pain in the butt. And kids don't like museums. And we don't want to get a babysitter because we don't see them during the week, and then we feel guilty, And so I said, well, you don't know about museum bribery? And he goes, what's museum bribery? And I said, well, we like museums. When my kids were little, we would give them a dime every time they saw a horse in the museum. And at the end, we would get to go to the gift shop. And this would last for a good hour to 2 hours. We wouldn't always get 2 hours, depends on how tired they were, but as long as they were fully stoked with snacks, and we might get 2 hours at the museum to look around while they're looking for horses or cows. And if you do a little research, you can find out what there is in that museum. So sometimes we would prepare a list, like if we knew there were a lot of Goyas, we would say guys with pointy beards. And you get a quarter for, any picture that has a woman with 3 eyes, if there's Picasso, or whatever it is. You can come up with these things, right? And, after 2 hours, even 4- and 6-year-olds will get a little antsy at the museum, but the money bribery factor would keep them going for a good 2 hours. We'd have a nice time at the museum, everybody would go home happy, and they would buy some tchotchke at the store, right? So this guy was so grateful. He emails, so here's a guy who was not happy to see me, was kind of pissed that he was there, right? Did not have a job for me, called me back the next week to tell me how great museum bribery worked, and he would watch out for other opportunities in case anything came up and call me first, okay? So I didn't go in there like, I was already asking him for a favor, but the fact that I did something for him, that was what he remembered, right? And it had nothing to do with science whatsoever, it had to do with parenting. Go figure, okay? All right. So good networking is a bit scary. I had to make you all sit down actually next to someone, right? So it is a little bit scary sometimes. But, it's usually worth it. So if you're going to an event, you want to do your homework, have a little bit of assertiveness, think about who's going to be there. Are there speakers that you want to meet? Sometimes it's okay to be a little pushy and work your way into a conversation that someone else is happening. If you see someone standing alone, chances are they would love to talk to you because they're alone too. And so that's a good person to go up to and introduce yourself. Talk one-on-one and move on if you're not jiving with somebody. The idea is to meet people that you're interested in talking to. It's not impolite to say, thanks, it's been nice meeting you, and to move on. That's okay. So you should have an introduction ready. So I don't know if let's talk about the elevator speech. So the reason why it's called an elevator speech is because you should be able to say what you work on in the time that it takes for you to go up and down 10 floors in an elevator. That's why this is called the elevator speech, okay? And you want to really practice the elevator speech. So, obviously when I moved to Addgene, I had to come up with a new elevator speech, right? And what is Addgene about? And be able to explain it very quickly, what's cool about it, to hook people in and get them interested. So we're not going to have time to really get into this, but think about this. If you walk up to someone and say, hi, I work on the phosphorylation of MAP kinase and what that does for its localization in the cell. And if they don't work on MAP kinase, they're bored in 30 seconds. They've been bored since you opened your mouth, right? They have no connection with you, okay? But if you say, I'm interested in the way cellular activity leads to human disease. Here's the disease that I work on. So, and they might say, oh, you work on a neuroscience disease? I work on a neuroscience disease. Or they may have an aunt that has that disease, okay? So you have to bring it up a level, if you're at a networking event, to where you sound like you have some thought about what you do on a sort of bigger level and its impact on the world. You cannot, I get set up for coffee with people, and I had this one woman meet with me, and I said, tell me what you do, and she started getting into phosphate 573, and I'm like, no, I don't want to hear about phosphate 573. Oh, but I look at the proteins that phosphorylate. No, I don't care about that. It took me like a half an hour to get her to stop talking about phosphate 573. This is not interesting in a networking situation, unless you meet, of course, the other guy who works on phosphate 573. Then you can talk about that all you want, and that is fun. That does happen, okay? So if you go to the right conference, then you can get really low and talk just about that phosphate, but otherwise not interesting, okay? The other thing I do is I talk, I'm a little open about talking about myself. Now, some people are more open and less open. Every time I give a talk like this, I come up with what's on my mind today, right? So this morning, I won an award. It was quite a surprise. We're in the audience, they're announcing the awards. There's Addgene, and then 3 organizations that, have you ever, nonprofits, Kids and Kittens? So like somebody that helps homeless people, somebody that gets kids through foster care, like real serious social issues. And then there's us, we help scientists share plasmids, And so it was a little embarrassing when we won, actually, okay? And they put us at the table with all the other people in our category. That was a little bit of social networking mistake. Usually you spread the people out in one category at an awards event. So I literally had to get up from the table who I had just networked with. We'd all introduced ourselves, shook hands, good luck, and then we won. And I felt really yucky, actually, for a second. And then I felt happy because we won. So you're not going to forget that story. Okay, has nothing at all to do with science. I often tell stories about my kids. They don't like that. I probably should stop doing that now that my son's a junior at MIT. But just have something that you're willing to share. What's bothering you today? When my kids were learning to drive, that was a big source of stories because really I was having a lot of angst about that. It was fairly painful. When I had to teach them. My husband gave up. He's like, I can't do it. It's too scary. You have to do it. So whatever it is, come to an event with some conversation ready. What is on your mind today? That is the smallest and easiest trick of networking. Don't leave a seat between the person next to you when you sit down, and have something to talk about, okay? And so when you get up in the morning or you go to an event, think about what those things are. Okay, so let's talk about the networking. You're at the event, you have the name tag on. Do not put the name tag where no one can see it, underneath, on the bottom, on your butt, whatever it is. People are visual. You want people to remember your name, duh. So you have to put the name tag somewhere where they can see it. And if they don't pronounce your name correctly, say, no, look at my tag. This is my name, okay? It is not rude. It is completely polite to share your name properly with people. Now, does anyone here have a name that's not, English speaking that's hard to pronounce? What's your name? Qinghua. Did I say that right? So how should I say it? Chenghua. Was that better? Okay, so I'm not going to forget her name now, right? So you have an actual advantage, believe it or not. You can say, no, it's pronounced this way. This is not rude, this is polite, okay? So if you're lucky enough to have a name that's a little tough, it's good. If you have a name that's really, really tough, you may want to pick an American nickname if you're in an English-speaking country, because it's very hard, okay? And you could say, that's not my real name, but it's the name I use because you will not be able to pronounce my other name. And then they will remember that, okay? So teaching your name is extremely important, right? Learn how to shake hands. So illness aside, in this country, people still shake hands. In Europe, people shake hands a lot. I know different countries are different, so you have to kind of get the feel for your culture. Japan, not as much shaking hands. There's more physical gestures that are used, but it's good to kind of get the pulse of what people do. But in this country, you shake hands, okay? I swear to God, if you give somebody a limp handshake, they think less of you. They have done studies on this. It's ridiculous, it's stupid, but it is true. You must be able to give a firm handshake. Women, men, I don't care who it is, I've had some of the limpest handshakes from men. It is not a gender-related thing, okay? So go home with your partner or your spouse or your lab and practice giving a nice, firm, but not break your knuckles handshake, okay? And practice doing it comfortably, meeting the hand, hi, I'm Joanne, and reaching in and doing the hand thing, okay? It's just a social convention that makes it easy for people to connect, and if someone gives you their hand, you'll know what to do, okay? So it's just an easy thing to learn, just learn it. Okay, so we talked about that. So here's the part where it's very important to listen, so people like to talk about themselves. So sometimes the best networkers are the people who ask good questions. So, talk about yourself a little, but then find out what that other person is about. See if you can get them to open up. So if I hadn't asked that guy, hey, you look terrible, what's the matter? And we hadn't had a real conversation, that would have been a disaster of a coffee with no benefit to either of us at the end, right? So sometimes asking people open-ended questions that don't have yes or a no answer. So how are you feeling today? What was your biggest challenge at work this week? What's bothering you at home? Whatever it is, asking those open-ended questions. Pay attention to what people have to say. You can learn a lot about them. I think that's kind of a given. Again, think of ways to help them. So that's one thing that I'm always doing, is thinking of ways I can help people, because that's how I'll be, helpful to them and they'll remember me. Never badmouth people, that goes without saying. It's a small, small community here in Boston. And if you stay in Boston in science or tech, I have news for you. You're going to meet somebody. I sat next to a person today, and I thought I had nothing to do with her, from a nonprofit that had nothing to do with I do. And one of her best friends is a big guy at Third Rock Ventures Biotech, who is a company that I was interested in. I interviewed at many of their companies. Is a venture capital firm. So you just don't know where these things are going to go. So don't talk bad about people. Don't keep score. So I don't do things for people and then expect them to do something back for me. It's kind of like a pay it forward kind of thing. You do favors, somebody will do a favor for you. It's not like a one-on-one kind of thing. And finally, if you're at a networking event, one of the nicest things you can do is help someone else network. So if you see someone standing alone and you're talking to someone, you can walk over and say, Mary, have you met John? And introduce them. And one way to remember what people told you is to introduce them. Have you met John? He works on signaling and yeast. What do you work on? And to be welcoming to someone in a conversation is one of the nicest things you can do. And that person is going to like you right away for having done that. So without even an effort, you've made a friend, right? And people help people they like more. I think that should be obvious. I don't have that on any slides, but there's actually a funny story that about Benjamin Franklin. Whenever Benjamin Franklin was in the Continental Congress, there were some guys he didn't get along with because he had a fairly strong personality. I don't know if you've ever read about Benjamin Franklin. Whenever he was somebody he wasn't getting along with or couldn't agree with, he would ask that person to borrow a book. So borrowing a book those days was kind of like borrowing an iPad. It was a much bigger deal, right? Because there were fewer books, they were very expensive, they were kind of a precious commodity. And the person maybe grudgingly would lend him borrow the book. He would read the book, and then he would tell the person how smart they were for owning that book and how grateful he was for the favor that they did him. He noticed that people that did favors for him liked him better. Okay, so it's a weird thing. So if you're worried about asking for help, when people can help you, they actually like you better. So psychologically, go figure. So don't be afraid to ask for favors. Some people will say no. That's the worst thing that will happen. Okay, so now hopefully everyone in the room is sitting next to someone that they don't know. If you're not sitting next to someone you don't know, you should pick up your butt and sit next to someone you don't know, okay? So we're going to actually do this. So we won't do it. We're just going to do it everywhere itself. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. We're going to do 4 minutes, 2 minutes on each side. Each person take 2 minutes to introduce themselves to the other person that they're sitting next to that they don't know. Okay, it's going to be noisy in here, but that's okay. Okay, so remember now, this is not so hard now. I'm forcing you to do it. Okay, so you have an excuse. You are sitting next to someone that you don't know. Okay, and so this is prescribed, but this is the same thing that you can do when you sit down to go to a conference next week. Okay, so go ahead. You have 2 minutes. Take turns, and I'll tell you when we're halfway through. Okay, so that wasn't so bad, huh? Was that okay? Raise your hand if that was really, really awful. Both of you, both people in the pair should raise their hand if it was really, really awful. So I realize this is a bit contrived and I've made you do it, but seriously, just the act of sitting down directly next to someone and saying, hello, my name is all it takes to get people started, okay? And if you sit down next to someone mean and they don't want to talk to you, that's okay. You don't want to know them anyway. It's okay, okay? So, if you're the kind of person that really dreads networking events, seminars, this is the setting where you're going to meet new people, okay? So, have it be my charge to you. You're here at school anyway. I'm not saying that you have to go out at 10 o'clock at night and find someone to talk to. But if you're in a seminar room and there's someone you don't know to sit next to, don't sit with your friends. Do it twice this month. Sit next to someone you don't know and get to know them a little better. And if there's people in your lab that you like, have lunch with them, take them out for a drink after work, whatever it is, start developing the relationships for the people that you enjoy their company and you learn from, because you're not going to be postdocs and grad students forever. That person you're sitting next to could be, like I said, on your grant committee in 10 years, right? So it's good to get to know people. It's good to spend a little time with them and make time for that. Okay, I'm going to buzz through the rest of these slides so we have a few minutes for questions. I talked a little bit about asking for help. It really helps to do that, to tell people what you need, what you're looking for. Leads, names, ideas, and contact info, those are easy things to share with people if you know someone or some way you can help people. Ask questions yourself and do your homework. Conferences and meetings are good ways to meet people. Participating in organizations and volunteering on your postdoc association, for example, is a good way to get involved and meet people. So following up, this is the tricky part. Okay, so you've met someone at a conference, say, and now what do you do? This is where I always get my most questions, okay? So, this is where it needs nurturing. So show appreciation. If someone did something for you or spent time with you, you can send them a thank you. It's really easy to send email these days or tweet or whatever, however it is you communicate with that person. Hopefully you've exchanged cards. Does everyone have a business card here? If you're moving into industry, you still need to get business cards. You can get them from Vistaprint. You can put the MIT seal on there so it looks official. Say what your field of research is. You're a graduate student or a postdoctoral associate, whatever it is. If you're going to events and networking, especially for industry, it's because the reason why you need a card is not to give out your card. That's how you get a card. Does everybody get that? Duh? Okay, I don't know if I get that. So if you meet someone important and you want their card, you have to give them yours, and then they have to give you theirs. That's how that works, okay? I figure I should put this on the slides. This is like obvious to me, but not obvious to everyone, okay? So, so you have that person's card. You may want to send them an email and say, it was nice meeting you. Thanks for your time. I learned a lot from our discussion. It can be enough as a first step, just to say thank you. So maybe you want to call them. Maybe you have a paper that you read that you think they'd be interested based on what they work on. You know, there's so much literature. Pointing out a paper to someone that might be interesting for their work is a favor, and it's a useful favor. You know, you may have more time to read than they do. Sometimes if you have data that you have not yet, that isn't published, that you want to share unpublished data, that's a great way to get people to talk to you, because you know more than they do about your unpublished data, so that's interesting. I follow the Fierce newsletter if you're interested in industry networking. There's Fierce Biotech, Fierce Pharma, Fierce Drug Discovery. There's also Bio Today. Oh, there's thousands of these things. And when I see that someone's company, something happens at their company that's good or bad or whatever, I'll email them and say, hey, great, you guys got funding, $10 million, congratulations, sounds great. You know, I do that all the time, congratulate people. If you use, we'll talk about LinkedIn in a second. If you use LinkedIn, you congratulate people on new jobs or new roles. You know, one way that I network with people is I go to the same organization over and over. So let's say you're at every postdoc association meeting for a whole year. You're going to get to know those people whether you like it or not. It's much more comfortable with people that you know and you haven't just met a second ago. Okay? So going to the same event. So whether it's Biotech Tuesday or Mass Bio Committee Forum events, if you go to the same things over and over, you start to see the same people and it gets much less uncomfortable. Okay? And finally, one of the great things to do is invite someone to speak. So if you meet someone who would be a good speaker in your department, see if you can invite them to come speak. It's an honor for them. The worst that they'll do is say no, but they're flattered, right? So it's a good thing. So let's talk about social media for 1 second, because we have to. Okay, so don't put dumb stuff on Facebook. Enough said, okay? If you want a job in industry, I know this is painful for academic scientists, you must have a LinkedIn profile. I'm sorry about that, it's just the way it is. People that are looking to hire you expect you to have a profile on LinkedIn. Look at profiles that you like, try and make your profile look like them. Your LinkedIn profile should look as good as or better than your resume and should have a professional picture. It should not be you with your dog or your kids. This is not Facebook. It should be a headshot or you at your bench or something professional looking, okay? This is a great way to stay in touch with people, link in with them. Never send a generic LinkedIn invitation that just says, I want to link in with you, unless it's the person that sits next to you at the bench all day, okay? Always customize it. And LinkedIn sometimes tricks you. It says, do you want to connect with this person? And you connect, and it sends an automatic thing. Don't ever do that. It's creepy, okay? So when I get LinkedIn invitations from strangers, I delete them. Unless they say, hi, Joanne, I saw you speak at the MIT Postdoc Association. You know, I'd really like to contact you about a question I had. Can you please link in with me? But if you just send me a cold invitation that says, I'd like to add you to my professional network, I'm just creeped out and I delete it, okay? So, and I'm like many LinkedIn users do that. So do always customize your invitation. In Europe, Via Deo is very popular, so if you're planning to go back to Europe, I don't know about other countries, but I know China has its own network. Different countries have different things. You should find out what the important network is for your area. I think in Europe they're using LinkedIn some, but they're also using Via Deo, so you might have to do both. And you know, now I have this LinkedIn contacts things, and remind yourself how you met people. You can put notes in your LinkedIn connection records, and that's a good thing if you don't have a good memory how you met people. You know, it can be very helpful. And don't ask people that you don't know for stuff, because that's just weird and rude. Like, why would they do that for you, you know? So you want to use LinkedIn to connect to someone and get introduced to someone. That's the best way to use it. There's tons of stuff, by the way, on the internet on the good ideas for how to use LinkedIn. So I won't go into any more detail here. So if someone refers you, let's say someone introduces you to someone else. So you do meet that person and they say, hey, you should meet so-and-so at this company because I think, you know, that would be good. So you only copy the referring party on the initial email, then leave them out of it. They're not interested in your whole exchange with the other party, okay? So That's just a polite thing. When you are connected to someone, ask specific questions that are easily answered. Be prepared. Thank the person who originally connected you for the connection. There's just some normal human etiquette here. Saying thank you is really, really important, and people don't do it often enough. It's so easy with email. You have no excuses, right? We used to have to write actual letters to do that or physically pick up the phone. And with email, just the courtesy of a thank you email is very nice. Okay. So you all have something to offer. You may feel like you're early in your career, but you're an expert in something probably very early on in your science. You know the most about your thing. That's what you have to offer. You may have other skills. I have parenting skills. I can cook. I know Jewish cookery, you know, so I have stuff to offer. You have, you know, you may have different ethnic food offerings, or you may know where the best beer is in Boston, or whatever it is. You have something to offer. So dig down, and what is it that you have to offer? That's what you want to share with people. So try something new. This month, don't sit by yourself at any seminars or conferences, okay? Just try that. It may work, may not work for you, it may work for you, but try something new, because if you're not meeting people and you're not developing relationships, aside from the very small people just in your lab or your research group, if that's not working for you, try something different. That's just all my advice. It does take time. It does take time. I know you're busy, but I cannot tell you how important the soft skills are. All I do is go around speaking to hundreds of postdocs every week that want to get grants and jobs and don't know how to do it, and they wait till it's like they've been trained as scientists for 10 years. It's much easier to learn it along the way, okay, and to start doing it earlier, not when you need it. So if you activate your network when you need it, it's too late, because the people that you meet yesterday are not the people that are going to help you today. It's the people you met 5 years ago that are going to help you today, okay? So you have to make time for this. And finally, my favorite networking secret is be memorable. So when you first meet someone, be memorable. That's the part about having something to say and being a little open with maybe a little private information, something that happened to you today. You know, just open up enough so that the person and you can have a conversation. Because if you open up, the other person will open up as well. So where can you practice? In your department. The National Postdoc Association is a very cool organization, and you have one here. There's professional organizations. There's all kinds of networking groups here in Boston. You're so spoiled here in Boston, it's ridiculous. You know, I can sometimes talk to someone for 3 minutes and then tell them which networking group they should go to. You know, so there's dozens of good groups for different types of scientists and technology people in the Boston area. So you have no excuses. Just go online and do a little research. Okay, and that's my last slide. Thanks for listening, and now I'll take questions. Yeah?
So do you have any, so you said you worked outside of Boston in a smaller place. Do you think that networking can facilitate much more challenging?
When you're not in Boston. Oh yeah, I went to speak at the Mayo Clinic. It was totally depressing because like they're just, pardon? In Minnesota, yes, in rural Minnesota, not even at the University of Minnesota. So, you know, I guess I would say that's where conferences become very important. And you probably should do everything you can to get out of your small town and interact online or at conferences with people and stay in touch with those people as best you can. Be on a national committee for something. You know, I mean, this isn't to say that the people that are in your group are not going to be important later. So developing relationships with the people in your group and in your department and in your school are not important, right? So some of my closest connections now are my grad student roommates, right? We're still helping each other. You know, but they're like relatives. I can like ask them anything, you know. So you want to be developing relationships like that, right, where people that you really spent time with, right? So I think the thing to do is not to worry too much about what you can't access, but do a good job at nurturing the relationships you can. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other questions? Uh-huh.
How internationally connected is like a professional biotech community in Boston? Because I would like to move to industry, but in Europe.
Yeah. Huge. So you're so lucky that you're in Boston because so this is really funny. Whenever I speak at Harvard or in the Longwood area or even at MIT, there's so many, graduate students and postdocs from so many countries, right? So I would purposely network your way to people who are from the countries that you are interested in going to and nurturing those relationships, right? Also, a lot of those companies have divisions here or send representatives here or have offices, like Swissnex has an office here, which is a great place to network if you're interested in going to Switzerland. And there's a British consulate that has events. Again, no excuses. The internet can open these doors for you about what's going on in Boston for these communities. So it's pretty, if there's any city to be in to take a leap to go back to Europe, it's Boston. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So you said nurture those relationships with people who you like.
Yeah.
Not necessarily people you don't like, and offer to help
Mm-hmm.
do things and connect people. And one of my struggles has been that sometimes people who are influential and I recognize could benefit me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually support what they're, like I think they're sleazy or I think they're not smart. And so I struggle
Yeah.
with whether, like, if I connect that person to someone who I do think
Mm-hmm.
is, smart and not sleazy,
Right.
am I lending my name to?
Oh, yeah. So you are in deep at MIT, by the way. There's only something only an MIT student or postdoc will say. I'm married to one for 25 years, and I have, they have to be smart, right? So just recognize that about yourselves. No respect for people who aren't smart. You got to wipe that look off your face, okay, that you have when you meet someone who's stupid, okay? Just FYI. Now, even not smart people can be helpful. So I'm going to talk more about nice and not sleazy, okay? Because even people who went to Harvard, by the way, they can be smart too. But okay. So I'm kidding. Yes, you are absolutely. I would never ever introduce one person to another without qualifying and saying, well, I will introduce you to that important person I know, but I'm going to warn you, he's kind of a jerk. Okay.
Then you're bad mouthing.
So you have to use your judgment, right? I mean, if you have to use your judgment there. Now, sometimes those people are beneficial. I have to say, I don't have beers with the people I don't like, but would I call them if I needed a job interview? I might. Yeah, I might. So, you might say, you might even be more political than that. I'll introduce you to him, but I'm not sure that he'll have the time to help. He may not put himself out for you. I'm just warning you, okay? So yes, because and also, I mean, never ever, I think this should go without saying, never ever write a reference or refer someone that you can't say something nice about. Okay, so if I'm asked to be a reference for someone that I can't write a good reference for, I just tell them I'm not comfortable I don't know them well enough, okay? Because your name is, so you help someone get hired by writing a reference and then they do a bad job, you look terrible, right? So you have to be, your reputation is extremely important in networking, extremely. Yes, there are important, influential people who got where they are and they just did it by being smart and not by being nice. Maybe you're one of those people, I don't know. There's people who can make it just on their brilliance, and there's plenty of those at MIT, but most of us aren't. I'm certainly not. Like, I'm just not that, unique and smart. So, so you can't look at someone and say, that's not fair, they got where they are and they're totally a jerk. This is the way of the world. This is going to happen, okay? But it doesn't mean that you have to be that way, and it doesn't mean that you have to help those people, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So better to have 5 people that you know really well and that you've really developed a relationship with than 500 people that you've just exchanged cards with. Right? So that's what I'm talking about. The people that you met this year are not going to do much to help you get a job. It's the people that you've been in touch with for many, many years that you can call on when you need something. Okay? So, and what I say is, why bother spending all that time with people you don't like? So that's where find the people that you have something in common with, or in my case, it was very upset at the lack of diversity in science. I met a whole lot of people who were just as furious as I was about that, right? And so those are the people that I've been working with for 20 years now, some of them, to work on issues of diversity, of gender, of race, of sexual orientation, geography as well. So those are all things that are very important to me. So you pick what's important to you. Music may be important to you. You're going to meet a lot of other people who music is important to them. Whatever those things are that move you, that's where you should move your time and meet those people, right? Okay, thanks for coming. Good luck. Nice to meet you.